This week on Arizona Illustrated, the woman behind some of Tucson's most original and powerful structures, administering mental health services in southern Arizona, a small and unique musical instrument, and our favorite place this week, the simple charm of Art Brown's office. Welcome to Arizona Illustrated. I'm Tom McNamara. Back in the late 1950s, if you had said that a Tucson building was built by such and such an architect, it would have been assumed that you were referring to a man. At that time, only 1% of the total number of registered architects in the U.S. were women. And by 1970, little had changed. But that didn't faze Tucsonan Judith Chafee, who was on the cusp of a career that continues to influence architects today.
When I walk into a Judith Chafee house at a different time or a different time of my life or a different season in the year, I always see something new. You see somebody's mind turning. You see an intentionality about how life could be lived in a place.
Tucson is build it now, build it fast, get it done. And Judith was, let me think about how I can make that idea like no other idea that's ever been built before.
She was kind of the architect's architect. Anyone who was serious about architecture in town knew her and knew her work.
18 years after her death, people still really enjoy talking about Judith Davidson Chafee.
Judith Chafee is a complex figure. She was not an easy person to be around, and I'm sure she didn't suffer fools gladly.
If you were a fool, you were going to turn around and walk right out. That wasn't the place for you.
She had certain expectations and certain standards, and she was going to try to live up to them and expected everyone else to do so also. That's hard.
You either went elsewhere or you did what she said.
When people heard we were working with Judith Chafee, they said, "Oh, how is it going?"
She was one of the most critically acclaimed and controversial architects to have practiced in southern Arizona. She smoked, drank, cursed, and she built houses.
If you called her Tucson's best female architect, she would have been highly insulted.
Her life was all about architecture.
I knew that I was dealing with somebody who was on a different planet, and I had nothing to lose and everything to gain by shutting up.
She was the first woman from Arizona to be named a fellow in the American Institute of Architects, built record homes, AIA design winning homes, and her Ramada house was even put on the National Register of Historic Places.
She's a great architect. Not just a good one, she's a great architect.
Locally, however, she is most known for the controversy that once surrounded this piece of desert in the Tucson mountains.
Former Old Tucson executive Jerry Blackwell commissioned architect Judith Chafee to design a house. What was built is widely considered to be one of the most significant examples of modern desert architecture. But the Blackwell house stood on land that Pima County wanted to make part of Tucson Mountain Park. So 8 years after he moved in, the county essentially forced Jerry Blackwell to sell his house to the county. Since then, the abandoned house has been gradually looted.
Something that might seem a little strange to you is I'm kind of proud at how well the house has done, considering what's been done to it. I love concrete, and I think the fact that this still has a feeling of place that fascinates people.
The Blackwell house was loved by some, despised by others. One op-ed from the Tucson Citizen begged, "Bring on the bulldozers, please," saying, "To most, the home is downright ugly and doesn't belong there. It sticks out like a concrete and steel hulk of a sore thumb in a beautiful sea of desert."
The way the house was very clearly tuned to its desert environment, it's a house that a lot of people in this community thought was very indicative of how you might live graciously in a desert environment.
In 1993, the county still wanted to demolish this building, but a group of architectural students and faculty at the University of Arizona rallied to save it. Chafee moved to Tucson for the first time at the age of 5. This adobe house that her family moved into would inspire her the rest of her life.
That house and the way her mother created a life for their family there was really important to Judith Chafee. She found these very sort of subtle moments in that house that she took with her throughout her career. This idea of seasonally changing how you live in a house, how light came into that house.
She would visit the home often later in life. Judith's mother, a Harvard-educated anthropologist, managed to introduce her daughter to many stimulating people at a young age, especially given Tucson's size in the 1940s. Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood, lived nearby. She was introduced to architect Frank Lloyd Wright and even met Eleanor Roosevelt.
There was a really intriguing sort of range of people here that were attempting to bring Tucson into the 20th century, and that was a really important part of her early growing up, watching her mother be an activist and attempting to change the city for the better.
Judith's mother sent her to Chicago to attend the Parker School for her last 2 years of high school. She studied writing and visual art at Bennington College before pursuing her master's in architecture at Yale.
Paul Rudolph, when she arrived, was the new chair of this Department of Architecture. And so she came to Yale at a really very important time in the development of the school, but also sort of her development as an architect.
She also came through an architectural education program that was totally male-dominated. She was the only woman in her class at Yale.
Being the only woman wasn't easy, especially when she started winning awards.
The dinner for this was at a men's club, and Judith was told to wait in the kitchen until the dean called her to receive her prize, and then to leave and go back out through the kitchen.
But Chafee didn't let episodes like this define her.
She wanted to be established as the architect and not any other adjectives going along with that.
After graduation, she worked in some of the biggest architecture firms in the country and started to develop her own private practice. Her very first house was on the cover of Architectural Record magazine.
A woman architect working in the late 1960s on the East Coast, the first project to be completed was on the cover of a major architectural magazine and also took a prize in that magazine. It was a very choice place to be at the time.
Things seem to be prospering around here. New England villages as cleanly tailored as ever.
Chafee wrote of New England. The sides of the road are perfect. Placed stones, considered fences, the trees are beautiful. I think I will drown in the green muck. I think I will lose myself, my purpose, if I can't see something beautifully naked and clear. If I don't see the edge of space, the horizon. I go to the seashore and find the space of the desert. Just like that, Judith was headed back to Tucson.
I so regret not just saying, Judith, why did you move back to Tucson? She was at the top of her game.
She was beginning to start a career as a young architect in a place which was the center of architecture culture during that period in the late 1960s.
Because she was a star back east. She was doing great work. And she kind of threw it all aside and came back home.
She probably thought, I can do work in Tucson that I couldn't do anywhere else.
I think she expected coming back to Tucson would be returning to old friends and neighbors and an easy settling in. And I don't think it was.
Be sure to tune into Arizona Illustrated next week when we conclude the story of Judith Chafee. 1 year ago, a new company took over the task of administering mental health services in southern Arizona. Since then, Sempatico Integrated Care has made significant changes to how that task gets done, with far-reaching consequences for the people it's set out to serve.
When my son was really, really little, he was fearless. He taught himself how to swim. He would just go running and jump into the pool, and I'd be running after him. because he would just jump right into the deep end. 8 years old was the first time that he went into a hospital for his mental health. He wanted to kill himself. He had actually, at 8 years old, attempted suicide.
Nina DiConcini has been fighting for her son's mental health all his life. One afternoon in April, that fight nearly killed her.
He ended up cornering me in my kitchen with a 2x4 in one hand and a knife in the other. He's threatened me, he's threatened my life before, and always the look in his eye that I always saw was, am I gonna follow through on it? And this last time, I saw, am I going to beat my mother to death with this 2x4, or am I gonna stab her to death with this knife?
DiConcini says the juvenile court sought Level 1 residential mental health treatment for her son. Level 1 facilities are locked down and provide 24/7 medical care and supervision. But Simpatico Integrated Care, the regional behavioral health authority for Southern Arizona, denied the request.
I remember one of our last court dates, the prosecutor attorney is like, well, we need to get him into a Level 1. And my son's attorney, well, we need to get him into a Level 1. And the judge asked, well, how do you feel about that to my son? And my son's like, yeah, I need to get into a Level 1. And I'm saying that, and the PO is saying that. And we're just all sitting here in agreement that that's where he needs to be, but we can't figure out how to get it paid.
Regional Behavioral Health Authorities, or REBAs, coordinate and pay for behavioral health care in the regions they serve. Simpatico became the REBA for Pima County just last year. Before that, the nonprofit Community Partnership of Southern Arizona held the contract for 2 decades. The for-profit Simpatico has come under fire over the past year for the changes it's making to the mental health system, including service denials.
Thank you for calling NAMI Southern Arizona. This is Carl. How may I direct your call?
My phone rings frequently with people who are not able to get the services that they were previously able to get.
In the Southern Arizona chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Clark Romans works with provider agencies funded by Simpatico and with individuals and families who receive care. He says that although Simpatico aims to improve mental health services in Southern Arizona, its approach is putting pressure on patients and providers alike. More frequent reporting and audits stretch understaffed agencies thin, and reduced funding can push smaller agencies to the financial edge.
Many organizations have been told you better have a lot of money in the bank because you're not going to get paid this way anymore. I don't know if you've ever ridden over Niagara Falls in a barrel, but I have the feeling this is maybe what it feels like.
One local behavioral health agency bracing for that fall is Cafe 54, a downtown restaurant that employs and trains people living with a serious mental illness.
We're not just training people how to chop vegetables or serve food. We are working with individuals to overcome all the barriers of low self-esteem, confidence building, social stamina, which we take for granted.
With their funding cut earlier this year, the cafe faces a gap of more than $250,000 that threatens to shut it down. Simpatico CEO Terry Stevens says she recognizes the challenges that have come with the REBA transition and is now trying to ease the burden on agencies.
We re-looked at all of the auditing, all of the what we call deliverable requirements, and we've begun to reduce them.
Stevens, who once worked as a child and family therapist, has said that she opposes residential treatment for children because it can be traumatic and ineffective. Yet she denies that Simpatico refuses every request for that level of care.
I think it's really important that you know that it's not that we never use it. To today we have 140 kids in some kind of out-of-home placement. So it's not that it's never used. I never interfere with what our doctors decide.
To connect with the community and its concerns, Simpatico hosts public forums at least once a year. In its most recent one, Stevens met with frustration and pain.
I've never seen such a problem before.
Case managers are turning over left and right in the Simpatico system since their integration.
And it's not enough to say, call this number as Simpatico. That's not enough.
This is nice, but this is not reality. We have to find ways to overcome these barriers.
Yep.
No, I understand what you're asking for. And we've been involved. We walk away from those with ideas. We walk away from those sometimes with complaints that we look into. Because I really do believe that the only way we improve the system is if somebody tells me something's wrong.
Stevens says she intends to earn the community's trust and resolve the problems that have marked this first year of Simpatico's contract.
Contrary to belief, I'm not a bad person. I actually am somebody who really does care about the behavioral health system. I've worked in it 30 plus years, and my intent is to make sure that providers do it the best they can and that our members get better. And you know, you wouldn't do this for 30 years if there wasn't a reason.
The risk is that resolution won't come soon enough for some.
I think the community will survive this. What's kind of not visible in a lot of cases are the lives that have been partially or permanently ended or damaged, or setbacks that have occurred to people as we in the community and these organizations have tried to make this shift.
Ultimately, the juvenile court system paid for Nina DiConcini's son to receive Level 1 residential treatment. But she worries for what will be available to him and to herself and her young daughter when he comes home.
I hope that he can be a productive member of society, that he can make contributions to society in a positive way. My son's 15 and he still gives me hugs and he still tells me that he loves me and he still kisses my cheek and things like that. And so I know that love is there. There's so much on the news about mass shootings and people going off and hurting other people. And it breaks my heart. My heart always goes out to the mother of the person who's doing that. Because I sit there and I go, that could be me one day. If my son can't get the help that he needs, that could be me one day looking on the news and saying that's my son that's doing these things to other people. Why would they be willing to put the lives of myself, my daughter, and my whole community at risk?
According to the Arizona Daily Star and several community-based providers, Terry Stevens stepped down as CEO of Simpatico on September 30th. A humble instrument small enough to fit in your hands, and while its historic roots are 10,000 miles away, the Kalimba has found a home in Tucson.
A family of musical instruments, found in many cultures, heard in many ages, known by many names. A family of musical instruments originating in Africa hundreds of years ago and found today here in Tucson, Arizona.
I'm Mark Holdaway. I'm the Kalimba guy. The Kalimba has become my life. I was visiting some friends on spring break while I was at graduate school, and one of them had bought this exact model of Kalimba, the Hugh Tracy Alto. And we were passing it around, playing it, and this stranger hears us from the street, and he walks in, and he says, "Hey, you guys have a Kalimba, can I play it?" and we give it to him, and he starts making the most amazing music.
The kalimba is a member of a whole family of instruments with origins in many regions of Africa. Instruments in the family include the mbera, the karimba, and lekembe, among others.
Hugh Chafee was born in 1903. He was born into a big family, and they sent him off to Zimbabwe, and he worked on his brother's tobacco farm. He was overseeing black men working in the fields. He discovered that they played these amazing instruments. He and some of the people that he first met on the tobacco farm would go across borders and just around Africa looking for the traditional music. Kalimba was a generic name, and I use Kalimba as a generic for all these. Karimba music or mbira music, it's all cyclical. You set up a chord progression and define a melody within that progression, and it ends, and you go back and do it again and again. What fraction of these need sanding, Jordan?
The kalimba and its music have become a central part of Mark Holdaway's life. In fact, he's found a way to share his passion for the kalimba by distributing instruments from 5 manufacturers to eager kalimba players and students around the world.
They'll send in orders on the internet. We match the kalimba with a book that will work with it and put that in a box and send it in the U.S. mail. But it represents all the magical things you can do with the kalimba.
Many of the instruments Mark Holdaway plays and sells through Kalimba Magic are contemporary versions of more traditional, even ancient instruments.
1. Slow it down a little bit. This instrument is called mbira tabadzimu, which is the great mbira, or mbira of the ancestors. Traditionally, this is used by the Shona people in Zimbabwe, but it's spread across the world now.
Dawn Corso is an ethnomusicologist at the University of Arizona's Fred Fox School of Music. Her work with mbira focuses on the cultural aspects of the instrument and the long-standing oral tradition of teaching how the mbira is played.
Back to there. That's right. It's an oral tradition that really is passed from person to person, from master teacher to student. So if you think of your left only, when you learn through an oral tradition, if you take it out of your body, it's not yours. And so you really must absorb it mentally and in your body. That's good. You got it. You got it. You got it. Traditionally, the use is in a mbira ceremony. And the idea is that ancestors can help you. You can ask for help. You know, if you're having a difficult time, if you have a problem that you need to solve. But the way in which to bring the ancestors forth is through the ceremony in which people gather together and music is made.
The wood of the instrument represents the earth. The tines on the instrument represent all the living things on the earth, the grass, the cats, the dogs, the people. And when they act, they vibrate and make sound. But when they act, they don't act alone. Also, the voices of the ancestors chime in, either to say, yes, that's the right thing, or no, don't do that.
A family of musical instruments, found in many cultures, heard in many ages, known by many names. The kalimba and its musical relatives play a notable number of cultural and musical roles, not only in many African nations, but also here, today, in contemporary Tucson, Arizona.
A favorite place need not be the most ornate, elaborate, or attention-grabbing. It could be a place you've passed by many times without noticing that it's original. A snapshot of its time while reaching toward the future. Like architect Frank Mosch's favorite, Art Brown's office.
With a few hundred years of notable buildings, from Spanish Baroque to Arizona School Modern, great architecture abounds in our city. Choosing a favorite, I wish I had done that building, is beyond daunting. For me, the choice should be an architecture that, like our city, is honest, indigently beautiful, and uniquely Tucson. Having said that, I'd like to suggest a building that is simple, thoughtful, and fully aware of its desert setting, and as modest as Tucson itself. You may have driven past it hundreds of times and not marked its existence. The 1950s offices of Arthur T. Brown at 726 North Country Club Road is a simple study of space and planes, masonry and glass, executed so precisely that it seems there could be no other way. Brown, Arizona's first fellow of the American Institute of Architects, was an architect, artist, and inventor. He is recognized as a pioneer of passive solar heating and cooling. Brown, a true modernist designer, was fully informed by the wonder and optimism of post-World War II Tucson. This building's obscured delight takes a little effort to uncover. The innovative L-shaped space planning, abundant natural light, whimsical hyperbolic carport, and almost perfect solar orientation. They all combine to elegantly fill this site with a building and a hidden courtyard oasis. Brown's wonderful architectural gesture, born of his response to its place and function, is timeless, innovative, effective, and delightful. Although aging poorly, its original elegance and beauty is undeniable. The building follows an architectural path we might do well to re-explore. Does selecting a favorite building endorse a style or an architect? I hope so. Brown and his buildings represent the best of what should be Tucson architecture.
Thank you for joining us here on Arizona Illustrated. I'm Tom McNamara. See you next week.